Okay, so it's time to join the top half and bottom half of the quilt together. So I'll work on that and then we'll see what inner quilt looks like after we get it joined. Okay, so I have all the inner part of the quilt put together, and now I have the borders to do. And I just wanted to mention there can be some variance in your finished size once you put all your blocks together due to like how accurate you are with your 1/4 inch seam allowances and the fabric and your machine, things like that. One thing I just want to mention is as far as like the piecing and the cutting for these border pieces, it looks like to me, like measuring the final size of mine, that they're more than long enough. But I would recommend if you had to piece together your border pieces, like sew 2 pieces together to get it to be long enough, you might want to wait until all the inner part of your quilt is put together, all your rows of blocks, before measuring a precise size for your border pieces because of that variance. If you cut it before you get that done and then you measure it and then yours is slightly smaller or bigger than expected, it could throw that measurement off. If we look back to page 2 of our quilt pattern where it had the piecing or the cutting instructions, you notice that we have pieces C and D for the inner border. C was 48.5 by 2.5 and D was 40.5 by 2.5. And then looking forward to the page that shows the border assembly, you can see that C is the side inner border and D is the upper and lower inner border. And so what I'm going to do is sew pieces together to make the right and left sides long enough. And then I'm going to cut those. And then I will sew those onto the quilt, the right and left side. I think the D piece, the upper and lower, will be actually long enough from the fabric width I have is 42 inches. And I'll be able to cut those to match based on the actual size once I get the sides put on. So that's what I'm going to do next. And of course, you would adapt that to your precise size, how your inner quilt came out once you measure that. Time to join the right side inner border. And now joining the left side inner border. Time to open up these seams and press them. Pressing seams makes me think back to when I was a kid, and I think I was probably like somewhere between 7 and 10 maybe. And back in those days, you had to iron everything, like all your clothes. And there were 5 kids. And I think my mom is just overwhelming trying to iron everything for everybody. I remember being about that age. She's like, you got to start learning to iron your own clothes. And I remember, learned to iron. We ironed seems like we ironed our pants too. We ironed pants and we ironed shirts. And I don't know that I was ever the best at it, but had to learn to iron as a kid or your clothes weren't going to look good. So fabric was different back then. It seemed like everything you washed was wrinkled. If you washed it at home, it came out of the dryer wrinkled, or you hung it out. I think mostly thinking back on that now, I'm thinking about a dryer, but I think when I was that age, I don't know that we had a dryer because we had a clothesline. And I don't remember the utility room being big enough to have a washer and a dryer in our kitchen. There was a utility room. It was a real small closet. We hung all our clothes out, and it seemed like everything was always wrinkled. She had to iron everything. So, she knew what she was doing, really, because teaching us as kids a skill like that to iron, that was a good thing to learn. Ironing all those different parts of a shirt where it has those, I don't know what you call those, some type of points or pleats or something where the shirt has those shapes in the back and things to make it fit right. But anyways, I don't iron much now because, like I said, we don't have to iron anything now. We just wash it. And if you take it right out of the dryer, you can hang it up and it doesn't need to be ironed. But it's still a good skill. I have a feeling that probably not many kids today are learning to iron. I don't know. Seems like one of those things that's becoming of the past because they even say now in school that they don't teach cursive writing. I remember learning that cursive writing, in those you had to learn to write all the letters in the first grade or so. And then eventually you started on the cursive. You had to be learning how to do that cursive print. I remember it seemed like that wasn't an easy thing to learn, but we all learned it. We learned how to write cursive. I'm finding now, in the younger people I'm around, they don't know how to write cursive. And the fact that we all do everything on the computer and on the tablet and the phone, we don't hardly write anything. We might write a note or something when we're on a phone and we don't have anywhere to capture it electronically. It's interesting, though, how things have changed so much down through the years. Things that used to be important, really, not even hardly used anymore. It seems odd, though, because it seems like you're still gonna sign your name. Although now there's so much, even when you do a closing or a loan, a lot of it is electronic now, and you do that on the computer too, and you just adopt a signature. So I don't know. I guess maybe there's not much of a need for cursive anymore, but that's another one. Just thinking about ironing, how nobody irons anymore. That's another one that surprised me about hearing that they're not teaching cursive writing. Just cutting my top and bottom inner border pieces here. Time to join the top and bottom inner borders to the inner quilt. Okay, so got my inner border put on, and next I will move on to the outer border. Similar to what I said about the inner border, since the finished width of your blocks sewn together might vary due to fabric or the precision about sewing the 1/4 inch seam allowance everywhere, it probably would be good to wait until you can measure all the blocks assembled, the inner quilt, before we measure for our borders. And in this case, since we have the inner border on, we can measure with the inner border and then get some precise measurements for our outer border pieces. And so looking at the quilt pattern, here we have on page 2 under cutting instructions, we're to cut for piece G 2 52.5 by 4.5 strips, and for H 2 48.5 by 4.5 strips. And so my fabric is a 42-inch width, so I'm going to cut a couple short pieces to attach to both of the side and top pieces, and then I'll be able to put on my outer border. Okay, we got our seams pressed out on our outer border. Time to sew it onto the quilt. And now sew on the other side of the outer border. So I joined the outer border on the right and left sides. I'm going to press out those seams and then I'll add or join the top and bottom borders. I've sewed the left and right outer border on, and now I'm going to sew the top and bottom outer border. Okay, the last one, time to join the outer bottom border. So here's the finished quilt top. I hung it up on the curtain rod so we could get a better look at it. And so it remains just to create a backing for it, and then we'll put it on the long arm and quilt it, and then we'll bind it. Sherry has the quilt loaded on the long arm and ready to set up the computerized part. We chose this water meander design for doing the quilting on the long arm. Here's a close-up view of this design. This seems like this will go really well with the southwestern feel of the quilt. Here you can see the long arm running, and it's looking really good. Excited to see this get finished. For getting my binding ready, I've already cut the pieces when I did the initial cutting, but I'm going to sew those together now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take each strip, I'm going to put them face to face, and I'm going to overlap them like this on a 90-degree angle. And then I'm going to sew this on a diagonal. And then, of course, after sewing each piece together, I'm going to cut off the excess and leave like a 1/4 inch, like if we had a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so that I can then press out these seams. And now I'm sewing the binding to the back of the quilt first. Here, as we go around the corner, of course, we'll do a nice 45 fold over so that when we get to the face of the quilt, we'll have a real nice finished corner. And now I'm sewing the binding to the face of the quilt, giving a nice finished touch. And of course here on the corner on the front of the quilt, paying a little more attention to the folding of that corner on that 45 and a real nice clean finished seam. And here's a nice look at the front and back of the quilt. You can see that I used some of the piecing left over to complete the back of the quilt. Here's a little bit closer up view of the quilting that Sherry did on the long arm. It turned out really nice. On the back you can really see this in detail. So I'll show you kind of all of the back of the quilt where you can get a really nice look at that meander water quilt design. If you decided to do this sew along with me and you finished your quilt, I would encourage you to send that on to Lessons Learned. And on that channel, Sherry does a Finish It Friday series, and she features people's finishes there. If you enjoyed this sew along and these videos, I encourage you to subscribe to my channel, post a comment with your thoughts, give me a thumbs up. Also, if you enjoyed this, and I encourage you to watch for my next video where I'll be working on my next quilt pattern project.